Good morrow, scholars. Welcome back to Blood of the Dead. Sorry for a late upload. I couldn't fall asleep last night, and when I woke up this morning, I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed. And then I got hungry, and then I got thirsty. Clearly. Speaking of which. Anywho, we are on Chapter 7. In a Swarm of Death, page 56. Des tried to swallow the cotton ball at the back of his throat. I can relate to that. The tissue back there was so dry that he coughed and had a hard time catching his breath. Billie, so transfixed on the mass of zombies surrounding them, didn't look his way to see if he was all right. I can relate to that. When he was finally able to breathe, he looked at her with watery eyes. "We're going to die," he whispered, the words dripping with defeat. Billie only nodded. Should he tell her how he felt about her? If this was the end, what could it hurt? It's not like it would matter in a few moments anyway. "I love you," he said to her in his mind. Sounds about right. He wished she could hear his thoughts. He wanted her to know, wanted her to understand that despite the world nearly at its end, despite all the loss she'd suffered in the past year, despite the hopelessness that plagued each and every day, there was someone who cared about her. Deeply. That's sweet. Anyway. I can't say anything. Not like this. It'd be selfish of me if I did. It could also backfire and confuse her, and I don't want her last thoughts to be something like, "What do I say back, 'cause I don't feel the same?" I can relate to that. The zombies moved closer, their white eyes filled with hate, their mouths hung slack, eager to taste fresh meat, so raw and still filled with fresh blood. Ugh. "I have to try," he said quietly. "What?" she replied softly, her eyes settling on a middle-aged woman with short blonde hair. A part of the woman's cheek was missing, as was a chunk of her right hand. Her pale skin was the same washed-out gray as the rest of the dead. "I'm going to fight them." "You are?" I don't know why I said it like that, but I feel like that's how she would respond. Anyway. The zombies closed in. Des screamed and lashed out, swinging his right arm up in a wild arc and bringing it back down on the side of an elderly zombie's face, clubbing him on the cheekbone. The dead man's head angled to the side, lolled for a second, then was brought upright again. Just kicked him in the groin, and then moved for the undead teenage boy beside him. Knocking aside the kid's arms, he brought his forearm across the zombie's throat, whacking it in the neck. The kid fell back. The other zombies drew in, their arms swinging out. Billie shrieked and disappeared beneath a mass of smelly flesh, rubbery arms, and claw-like fingers. "Hey!" Des tried moving toward her. He was shoved back as three dead women cut him off and pushed him away into the waiting arms of a large black zombie who, judging by the smell and decay of his skin, must have been dead for the better part of the year. The big fella's blood-caked mouth open wide, his once pearly white teeth now faded to yellow, with black marks like burnt corn. Ugh. Des wriggled himself to the side within the man's grasp, just as the guy's teeth were about to take a chunk out of his shoulder. Tears sprang up from the corners of his eyes. He hadn't meant to cry. He just couldn't help it. Panicked instinct and preparation for death took over, and no matter how hard he resisted the black guy's hold, the more he found himself entangled within his enormous plaid shirt-covered arms. My brother wears plaid shirts. Billie's cries went from loud to quiet to loud again as she struggled to get out from under the three undead on top of her. Des couldn't see her. He could only hear her. "Help!" she screamed. Des was cut off when a chubby, blood-slicked finger stabbed into his mouth. Ugh. It tickled the uvula at the back of his throat, and he immediately threw up, warm puke gushing out of his mouth like cruddy water out of an overflowing toilet. Ugh. I just ate too. Anyway. Gravity took over, and the puke splashed back down to the rear of his throat, cutting off his air. Something firm and hard gripped his legs. Someone tugged on his arm and yanked so hard he thought he was going to be torn apart. Boom! I don't know. Cool liquid splashed on Des's face. More loud booms. More cool liquid. Sticky and grimy. More booms. Des! Billie shouted. Ah! Sorry. Des fell to the ground, his shoulder blades smacking into the pavement. The stinging impact jolted him, and his eyes shot open. Black blood covered his vision. He smeared it away. An old lady with bright white hair and olive skin stumbled over and stood over him. Her murky white eyes lost in a sea of rage, she jerked out both arms, fingers splayed, and lunged on top of him. Her growls and high-pitched shrieks consumed Des's ears. The funk of the air emanating from the hole in her throat made him gag. Would for me too. He spat a runny wad of bloody puke in her face. With everything he had, he brought in his fist and clocked her in the temple. Get off! I don't know. That's what it says. I'm not really good with sound effects. Do you guys remember whose line is it anyway? The original American version. Sound effects was one of my favorite games whenever they had audience members provide the sound effects because they were so terrible at it most of the time. I always felt like I could have done better if I could have been on that show. Anyway, where was I? More booms and odd noises. The zombies wailed, growled, gurgled. The thud, thud, thud of bodies hitting the ground rumbled along the pavement. Des's ears drinking it up. More strange noises and booms. The gunshots rang out, and the wall of bodies that had once loomed over him began to thin. Then, after a few more moments and fire-cracking blasts, were gone altogether. Des coughed, rolled over onto his stomach, and emptied his guts again. Head swimming, he took a trembling breath and slowly got onto his hands and knees. Stand up, a voice said off to the side. Don't pull so hard, Billie said, though to whom, Des couldn't see. What sounded like the soles of shoes scraping on pavement made Des turn his head to the side so he could get a better look at what was going on. Just beyond a carpet of 5 bodies, a young man with a shaved head was pulling Billie to her feet. The guy pulled on her wrist so hard when he helped her up that he nearly tossed her into the air. His large gun was aimed at her head the entire time. Get away from her, Des said, his voice hoarse and just above a whisper. Quiet, the man said, his green eyes rock hard, his gaze not just penetrating but downright cold. Oh man. Des pushed himself to his feet, teetered a step, then moved toward them. He tripped and fell when his foot caught on the underside of a zombie's arm. That would so be me. And he landed on top of another corpse. A strong hand grabbed him by the back of the neck and yanked him to his feet. A young man with a weathered face that made him look 10 years older than he probably was stared at him, then gave him a push to the chest. Hey, watch it, Des said. The man pointed the gun at Des's head. Immediately, Billie lunged at the guy. The man caught her, spun her around, and locked her arm in a chicken wing. Is that where you got your arm? Like that? I don't know. I guess that kind of looks like a chicken wing. I don't know. I'm weird. I don't know why it's so hot in here. Why does the water taste like lettuce? Anyway. Where was I? Billie, bent over at the waist, her arm forced at an odd angle behind her back, yelped from the pain. She tried to move, but each effort seemed to make the pain worse because her face pinched up, her lips pursed, her brow furrowed. Nearly out of breath, Des stared down at the barrel of the gun. What do you want? The man seemed to consider his words, then said, Take off your clothes. What? Des replied. What? Billie said. You too, he told her. What? Des wiped some more blood off his face. You're kidding. The man cocked the hammer of the gun. No, you've got 4 seconds. Just listen to him, Billie said, her face still contorted in pain. The man let her go. She stumbled to the side a step. The look of pain never left her face as she moved beside Des. 1, the man said. I don't remember this part at all. Where was I? Fine. Billie huffed and then began removing her shirt. Sorry. What are you doing? Des said, looking over at her. Do you want to get shot? She asked him. 2. The man took a step closer. No, but Billie's shirt was already off, and she was working her belt buckle so she could remove her pants. You always make things so difficult. Don't blame me if you get a hole blown through your face. 3. I can't seem to get his voice. Anyway. So the guy comes, kills some zombies, and wants us naked? Let's go, folks, the man said. 4. Des raised his hands. Okay. Chill out, Cracker Jack. Now's not a good time for wisecracks, Des, Billie said. Alright, whatever. He quickly kicked off his shoes and took off his tank top and pants and let them drop by his feet. Don't blame me if in a few minutes we're walking around like the rest of these creatures, gray and naked. Do you want our gitch too? I don't know what that means. The man shook his head. Billie looked relieved as she stood there huddled with her thighs pressed together and arms covering her chest. Take off your socks, both of you, the guy said, gun still aimed at them. And they did. The man moved over to Billie, put a hand on her shoulder, and squeezed hard, keeping her in place. Gun pointed at Des, he told him to turn around. No, this isn't awkward at all. He thought, and his arms in the air, turned around, moving slowly, still sore. He felt the palm graze his back, then wipe off some blood that must have gotten back there. Okay, now you, the man said. Billie slowly spun around in her spot. The guy moved her hands away from her chest and looked her over. Des half expected the man to have some sort of sleazy smile crease his face, but instead the man conveyed zero emotion, or even pleasure in looking at such a beautiful girl wearing nothing but her underwear. The man lowered the gun. Get dressed, he said, and turned his back to them. This was it. This was his chance. Grimacing, Des raised his fist and was about to plow into the back of the guy's head when Billie stopped him. He must have looked at her incredulously because she quietly said, Don't. If he was after us or wanted something, he would have killed us. His turning around is a sign of trust. So what? We're supposed to trust him now? What's the matter with you? He just saved our lives. Stop acting like such a guy. The dude was checking over us for bites. Then why didn't he say so? With a smile that Des thought was completely inappropriate given the circumstances, she said, Where's the fun in that? Rolling his eyes, he scooped up his clothes and got dressed as quickly as possible, minding himself not to let his eyes wander over to Billie, lest she should see him and lay into him later. She was the only friend he had, and the last thing he wanted was to blow that friendship, never mind anything else that might transpire between them. When they finished dressing, Billie cleared her throat, hands on hips. Des crossed his arms. The man turned around. Keeping his eyes locked on theirs, he pointed his gun at them. That's rude. Chapter 8. More. Boom. The shot rang out. Joe didn't have to be beside the two to know they heard the bullet whistle by. It zipped between their heads and into the bald undead fellow who dragged his feet as he came up behind them. The two ducked at the noise, covering their ears when they straightened. They followed his gaze to the zombie lying on the pavement behind them, blood pooling out the back of the dead man's head. The young man and woman looked at him with wide eyes, jaws slack. You're welcome, he said. Oh, right. Thanks. Sorry, the young man said. Yeah, thanks, the girl said. You guys really shouldn't be out here, Joe said. The girl with pink hair glanced at the bodies around her feet. We know, we just... Joe hefted his gun. Still one shot left, till he had to cock the hammer again. The chamber held 12 rounds. He still had 4 12-round clips attached to his belt. I don't know. There were more at home. Just... The scrawny young fellow stepped forward. We had to get out of my place. Joe arched an eyebrow. Bad case of rats. Rats? Yeah, dead ones, you know. The kind with white eyes, just like... The guy kicked the bodies at his feet. These suckers right here. The infection spread. Don't worry, they're still entrapped inside his building, just over there. The girl nodded down the street. You look surprised, the guy said to Joe. Should I be? It wasn't the best thing to say, but Joe had been so isolated from the rest of the world for so long that other than for his nocturnal activities, I just got stumbled. That he forgave himself for this one slip in conduct. All I know is something's changed, the girl said. She stepped forward and stood by her friend. There's been rumors online that things just feel different somehow. It's hard to put into words, but I think you and me and those rats just proved that something has changed. So far as we know, the animals hadn't been affected by the rain. A rat's an animal? I thought they were rodents. What? Oh no, it was Des that said that. Sorry. The guy said. The girl jabbed him in the arm, then looked at Joe. Forgive him, he's an idiot. To the guy. Yes, doofus, rats are animals too. The guy rubbed his arm where she poked him. What are you calling me doofus for? The girl smiled. Joe was not amused. Perhaps last year he would have found this kind of humor funny. He had always had a thing for how people interacted and loved reflecting on it, usually with a bit of wit. It was one of the reasons he loved Seinfeld so much in his former life. These days, however, you should get off the street, he told them. You're right, the girl said. You two have a place to go? He wanted them to say yes. He still had work to do tonight. Yep, she said. Okay then, we're done. Uh-huh. Her friend didn't seem to know what to say. By the looks of things, she was the commander in whatever relationship the two had going. He eyed them a moment, then said, bye, and turned to walk away. Look, the young man said behind him. Joe stopped, but didn't turn around, only turned his head toward them. Thanks for saving us. Joe managed a half smile. You're welcome. Stay safe. Okay. Joe walked away. You're such a coward, Des thought, as he watched their mysterious rescuer move away from them. Uh-oh. Hey, guy in the coat. The man stopped walking. Those rats are over there, remember? You're headed right. The man merely nodded and kept going. To Billie, the dude's gonna get himself killed. Not if they don't escape, she said. True, but still. Okay, it's over. Let's go. She maneuvered around the bodies, arms held out to keep her balance as she tried to find footing. Oh, excuse me. Careful, Bill. Don't call me that. I said Billie. No, you didn't. That would so be me. Where was I? Boots! Leave the turtles alone. I don't know what he does. Where was I? The two walked down the street, eyes peeled for any more of the undead. They took turns looking back at the man who appeared out of nowhere and saved their lives. It wasn't long before the man turned the corner and was gone. Des clicked his tongue. Great. What? He stopped walking and gestured with his thumb over his shoulder. Left my bar back there. Do you really want to go back? Do you? No. Me neither. He licked his lips. Some zombie wrangler you turned out to be. Want to just leave it then? She shrugged. Up to you. He set his eyes on the mound of zombie bodies in the distance. He really didn't want to have to go over there and pick through them. Even more, he didn't want to get their blood on his hands and accidentally imbibe it. What? He thought of the big black zombie that nearly killed him and how the dude had put a blood-covered finger down his throat. What kind of blood was that? He didn't know. Hopefully the kind that wasn't contaminated. Already feeling ashamed over his lack of courage, he decided to keep it to himself for now and only tell Billie if he absolutely had to. We'll be alright. There's more of the undead back there than we've ever seen at once in this area. That's probably all of them, and even if there are a few more out there, they're probably not on this street, he said. Okay, your call. They kept walking. A few minutes later, they came to a four-way stop. As they crossed the street, Des felt the strength run from his legs when he caught sight of moving shadows flanking them. The undead were coming from either side, droves of them. "Run!" he shouted, and pulled Billie by the hand. The second Billie caught sight of the zombie, she hopped into a sprint, and the two of them bolted down the street. It was long before they left the four-way and Walking Dead behind, and were almost at her place. Sorry. The two halted when a fresh pack of zombies were making their way toward them, several already looming around her apartment building, rocking side to side on their heels to a tune only they could hear. I've done that before. Where was I? Just threw his hands into the air. What's going on? I don't know, this is new, and we're trapped. Not necessarily. We can cut through the houses, hop fences and zip through a few backyards. Maybe the neighboring streets aren't as crowded and we can come back later. Which way? Right. I'm asking which way to go. Didn't she understand him? I said right. I also have this problem with people. They took off across the street. As they ran, Billie said, "Thought you were being sarcastic." "Now's not the time, Bill." "Don't call me that." Now's not the time. They reached a 5-foot-tall, brown-splatted fence. "Here," Des said, and cupped his hands together. "I'll boost you over." "Thanks." Billie raised her knee, put her foot in his hands, and placed her palms on the top of the fence. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3, and boosted her up. Billie was straddling the top beam on her stomach when she suddenly stopped. "Come on, hurry," he said. She hopped back down. "Not this way." "Why?" She didn't need to answer. Groaning and wheezing filled the air. Wheezing's one of my favorite Pokemon. Des peered over the fence, then shot back with a jolt when a pair of white dead eyes popped up to greet him. With a shout, he turned and ran, Billie behind him. They reached the street and were greeted by a row of undead men, women, and children. The deceased came toward them. The strong, hinting feeling that this could be a new chance to prove himself struck him hard and quick. But who was he kidding? There had to be at least 30 Walking Dead in front of him, and who knew how many behind. He could only think of one thing to say. "Run!" Coward. Never mind. They made a beeline to the right, zipping past the row of zombies as fast as they could. Des pressed his heels hard into the ground, creating a deep burn in his thighs. Billie ran beside him, and he realized that she could have easily outrun him, but was holding back for his sake. Does she have to be that good? He wondered. Man, beautiful and fast. He glanced over at her, watching her pink hair swing in the wind as she gunned it forward. There we go. A large shadow appeared in his peripheral, and wham! A dull smack plowed into his skull as a massive arm and meaty hand crashed down on his forehead, cutting off his sprint and sending him flying backside first to the ground. The world spun. Billie was somewhere ahead. Dizziness kicked in, and for a second Des forgot where his legs were. Then, remembering they were splayed out in front of him, he tucked his knees into his chest, went to stand, and was struck down again. An enormous dead man stood over him, 300 or 400 pounds of rotted gray flesh with skin peeling in places. Ugh. The putrid stench of BO mixed with rotten fish made his stomach lurch. He swallowed the gulp of puke that rose at the back of his throat. Its sharp orange juice-like taste only added to the discomfort, wreaking havoc on his insides. The mammoth zombie grunted. Dragging footsteps scraped along the ground behind him. He dared not look back to see how close they were. He could only imagine sneaking a peek and finding them so close he'd be a goner anyway. Where was Billie? From somewhere behind the wall of dead gathering around him. "Des, where are you?" "Here," he croaked. He doubted she heard him. The fat man's dead hand crashed down again, swatting him in the side of the head. His whole body swayed with the blow, and he was face to face with the grass in no time. The grass's boggy scent was utter relief compared to the foul stench that clouded the air. A part of him didn't want to get up, but lie on his side and drink it all in. But he had to get up. He had to. He couldn't die, not without telling Billie. Poor guy, he doesn't stand a chance. I don't feel like giving this any sort of inflection, so I'm just going to say hi-ya. Des glanced up. Billie was on the fat man's back, legs wrapped around his sides, her small feminine fists raining blow upon blow on the dead man's head and the tops of his shoulders. "No," Des said, and cursed himself for not being able to speak properly. I can relate to that. Where was I? Was he that out of it? I probably would be too after 3 hits to the head. Did I ever tell you about the time that I was at this huge lake party? Once my dad's company was having a gigantic barbecue, and I'm playing in the lake, and someone threw a brick at my head. And it landed, I think, about right here. I never did find out who threw it, and that's one of the reasons why I don't go swimming. Where was I? The fat man growled, reached a flabby arm over his shoulder, and grabbed Billie by the back of the neck. With one chunky swing forward, he whipped her off his back and sent her in a flip on top of Des. Her skull collided with his, and a ringing sounded in his ears as green and black fuzzies raced across his vision. I think I know what he's talking about. He might have said ow. He wasn't sure. His eyes hurt. A sharp pain throbbed at the top left side of his head. Billie was beside him, holding the side of her head, face down to the ground. "You okay?" he whispered. She hid her face from him, crying. "It's okay, Billie. The fat zombie called out a hoarse cry, as if announcing to the others that it was time to feast. "Billie?" She huddled into a ball. "Billie, listen to me." This cleared his throat. Was he really going to do this? Might as well, gonna die anyway. Can't get mad at me if she's... She can't get mad at me. "I'm sorry, Billie. I wish I could have saved us." Growls, grunts, and wet slurps, there we go, filled the air above them. Jess only half noticed that the creatures were actually waiting a few moments before eating. Usually they just grabbed their prey and dove right in. Something was happening with them. He just didn't know what it was or what to call it. This chapter is a lot longer than normal. Sobbing, Billie finally turned her head on the grass and faced him, her wide blue eyes rimmed red from the tears. Hopelessness filled her gaze and blanketed her face. "I want to say," he began, whispering. "What I want to tell you is..." Why couldn't he say it? Was he that much of a coward? "What I'm trying to tell you is, you see, Boom! A bucket of blood splashed onto them, stealing Billie from his sight. Another boom. More blood, like a tidal wave. The ground shook as something huge and heavy fell to the ground. The dead around them growled. Just wiped the sticky blood from his eyes, trying not to gag from its stench. Billie was now on her back, doing the same. The fat man lay still at their feet. The others looming over them had their gaze set forward. Some, Des thought, with disbelief written on their faces, though he wasn't sure they were smart enough to even be in a state of disbelief. Many dipped their heads and settled their eyes on them. More strange noises and more booms. 2 dropped dead. 1 toppled across his and Billie's chests. Billie shrieked, and more shots rang out above them. "Come on, get it off," she yelled at him. He stared at her a moment, half his mind still wanting to tell her he loved her, the other half coming to grips with the fact that if they didn't get off the ground, they would die. "Des, you idiot, let's go!" Grimacing, he said, "Fine. Want to be tough with me? Fine. Let's get the sucker off, and then I'm going to throw you to them. Got it?" Poor guy. More booms. She chuckled despite her tears, and with one push they rolled the corpse off of them. He got to his feet first, then helped her up. Dead hands reached out for them from all sides. Boom! A dead child fell. Boom! So did a young woman with a hole in her chest. Half her head suddenly went missing in a spray of brain and dark blood. Des punched the first zombie he saw in the face and kicked another in the knee. "Don't let them grab you," he told her. "Duh." And she stooped over her old man across the cheek. "You hit like a girl." "I am a girl." My sister hits really hard. The younger one, not the other one. Seriously, it hurts. Anyway. With 2 palms, Des shoved an obese woman away, then brought his foot down on a smaller one. He realized after the fact that it was a zombified little girl with her eye missing. Ugh. His heart ached for her despite her being in the reanimated shell of a cute 4-year-old with brown pigtails. That girl, probably in love with dolls and tea parties, could never have known that one day she'd be dead, walking, and stomped on by some gamer who didn't have the guts to tell the girl he adored how he felt about her. More booms. Des found a heavy branch a few feet away from the little girl's body and tossed it to Billie, who immediately began swinging it into the skulls of any of the dead that came near her. Des scanned the ground for another branch, but couldn't see anything. Nothing but the... "Come on," he breathed. "Can I get a real weapon? Always some dude's body part." He remembered the dismembered arm from his video game. With renewed determination, he added, "All right," and ran and picked up a dismembered leg from the ground, cut off at the knee, a piece of bone sticking out of it. He swung it around like a baseball bat, socking anything that moved to the side of the head. As the throng of zombies began to clear, he was finally able to locate the source of the gunshots. The dude with the long trench coat and big gun. He glanced over at the man, hoping the guy would see him, and he could give him a nod of acknowledgement. Instead, the fellow, lost in a trance of trigger-pulling mayhem, blasted shot after shot into the dead, bringing them down 1, sometimes 2 at a time. Oh, he does have a... okay. Privately, Des was impressed with the double kill, the way the guy was able to fire off 1 bullet through the zombie skull, the same bullet embedding itself in the brain of another behind it. That'd be neat. A strong hand grabbed Des's ankle. He brought the leg in a downward swing and knocked out the teeth of the dead man, who was mostly just torso. The half-body flopped on the ground as the zombie tried to grab Des's leg again. Des beat the guy on the back of the head with a dismembered leg, then dragged the dazed zombie to the curb and slammed its face down on the curb's edge. With 1 hard kick, he plowed his heel into the back of the dead man's head, curb stomping the sucker down so hard that the jagged edge of the curb ripped straight through and removed the top of the guy's head from the rest of his body. That's gruesome. Only then did the man in the trench coat seem to notice and give Des a nod of approval. Billie had noticed too, but looked away as if in disgust when Des set her eyes on her. Nothing works in my favor. Ever. I can relate to that. A few more shots, and the undead finally stopped moving. The three stood at different points amidst the field of bodies. Des couldn't believe how many there were. It was more than what had just been on the street. All those from the other side of the fence must have somehow gotten over it and joined their kin. Still, 3 taking out 50 or more wasn't bad at all. He stepped around and over the bodies and went over to Billie. "Are you okay?" She wiped a splatter of blood from the side of her face and cleaned the lenses of her glasses with her shirt. "I'll live." She put her glasses back on and glanced down at his lower right. He followed her gaze. "Oh," and dropped the leg. The two looked at the guy in the trench coat, who stood among the dead like some kind of beacon, smoke trickling out the barrel of his enormous gun. The man hefted the weapon. "Shouldn't have left you two alone." Des put his hands on his hips. "We could have handled it." The guy smirked. "Didn't look like it." "Always have something to say, don't you?" Billie quietly said to Des. "Usually." The three moved off to the side, away from the bodies. "This isn't normal," the man said. "No, it's not." The man scanned the bodies. 72. 70. Des started, but his voice squeaked. He cleared his throat. 72? "Fast counter," Billie said. "Necessary habit," the man said. Billie and the man stared at one another for a moment, then finally broke away again when Des coughed. "Sorry," she said, and offered her hand out to the man. "I'm Billie." Then, with a nod to her right, "This is Des." The man didn't say anything, but only took her hand. Was it Des's imagination, or did the two hold hands longer than a normal handshake? "Hey, how you doing?" Des said, and offered his hand, hoping the dude would let go of Billie's. The two men shook hands. "And you are?" Billie asked. The man seemed to consider her words carefully before he spoke. "Name's Joe." It sounded like he didn't want to reveal his real name. Did Joe have something to hide? Who knows? I know, because I read the book. And so do you, because you listened. Where was I? They all stood in awkward silence. Joe was clearly not used to talking much, or probably hanging around anyone. Most people looked at you straight in the eye when they spoke. Joe kept his gaze downward or over your shoulder. "I also do this." Billie nodded toward Joe's gun. "You seem to know what you're doing with that thing." "I try." "I say that too," Joe said. "Have you, I don't know, had to use it a lot recently?" "Today, yeah. I can't tell you what's going on, but I think they've discovered the haven, or at least realized that this is the least dead place in the city." "Seems that way," Des said, trying to contribute something. All of a sudden, it seemed like Joe was the star and Billie was his biggest fan. "Don't sweat it, man. You've got tenure." "I'm not spoiling anything. I'm just saying, like, from personal experience." "Where were you headed?" Joe asked. "My place," Billie said. "Now I'm not so sure that's a good idea. Who knows how many more are out there?" Joe nodded. "I don't know, what do you think? Think we should go back that way and risk it?" "We can go to my... Wait, never mind. Rats," Des said. The drone of flies filled the air as they began buzzing around the dead. "We have to get moving," to Billie. "Know anyone around here?" "A few, but I don't know their specific addresses, and I'm not in the mood to go banging on each and every door." Low moaning in the distance, a street or two over. "They're coming," Joe said. "Let's go." "Where?" Des asked. Joe walked past them, bending his elbow and resting the barrel of his gun on his shoulder. He didn't look back when he spoke. "My place." Okie dokie. Man, that was a long chapter. If I had known that, I would have... Well, actually, no. No matter what I would have done, it would have ended up being about 40 minutes today or yesterday. Oh well. If I had known that, though, I would have probably read it a lot sooner. Sorry for 2 late uploads. I just could not get the will to get out of bed this morning. It took me like an hour. Anyway, what was I going to say? I don't know. I need to work on my tan, because see the difference? See the difference? Like, even between here and there, you see the difference? Anyway, enough rambling. Let me know what you guys think so far. What do you think's going on with the zombies? What do you think is... Okay. Why are the rats suddenly affected? You know, things like that. I like to hear your guys' thoughts. Plus, it might help me with my own zombie story that I would like to write. Anyway, until next time, goodbye everybody. Sorry for rambling.